Have you ever been judged and humiliated in a place you own? Stay tuned to find out how this CEO turned the tables. I don't care who you think you are. You need to leave my store right now, or I will call the security to kick you out. The voice echoed through the pristine Beverly Hills jewelry store as 42-year-old Diana Mitchell, the black woman, stood face to face with store manager Patricia Whitman. Diana's hands trembled with barely contained rage, her navy blazer perfectly pressed despite the chaos erupting around her. Diana's eyes blazed with an intensity that made everyone in the store freeze. There was something in her gaze that spoke of power barely restrained, of someone who had been pushed past their breaking point. Patricia's face flushed red as she reached for her phone. "I'm calling the police. You look like a thief and should be arrested." But Diana was already one step ahead, pulling out her own device with hands that had stopped trembling and were now deadly steady. "Go ahead, call them. But first, let me make my call." Little did Patricia, the manager, know that this was the beginning of her downfall when the woman she humiliated revealed who she really was. Before we dive into the story, if you believe everyone should be respected, no matter their skin color, hit the subscribe button, type respect, and what country you're watching from in the comments. What secret power does this CEO hold to fire her own manager? Keep watching, only on Dark Stories. Diana Mitchell, 42 years old, was the founder and CEO of Luminous Designs, a company that owned 47 stores across 12 states and generated $180 million in annual revenue. She had stores in Beverly Hills, Manhattan, Chicago, and Atlanta. Celebrities wore her designs on red carpets. Her engagement rings were featured in magazines. She had been on the Forbes list of America's richest self-made women for the last 8 years. But here's what made Diana truly remarkable. Despite having more money than she could spend in 10 lifetimes, she still drove her 2003 Honda Civic. The same car she had bought when her business finally started making real money. When people asked her why she didn't upgrade to a luxury car, Diana always gave the same answer. "It's a waste of money. This car gets me where I need to go, and every time I look at it, I remember where I came from." Every morning, Diana followed the same ritual. She woke up at 5 a.m., put on that bracelet, and decided which of her stores to visit unannounced. This wasn't about checking up on employees or looking for problems. It was about making sure that every customer who walked into a Luminous Design store got treated the way Diana wished she had been treated during the years when she was struggling. "I built this company," Diana often told her employees, "so that no one would ever have to feel the way I felt when people looked at me and decided I didn't belong somewhere." Let me tell you about the store where all the drama unfolded. Luminous Designs Beverly Hills. This wasn't just any store in Diana's empire. This was her flagship location, her pride and joy, the crown jewel of everything she had built. Located on Rodeo Drive, this store generated $2.3 million in revenue every single month. It was where A-list celebrities shopped for red carpet events, where old Hollywood money families had been customers for years, where engagement rings worth more than most people's houses were just another Tuesday sale. Diana had designed every detail of this store herself. The lighting had been positioned to make every diamond sparkle perfectly. Running this flagship location was Patricia Whitman. Patricia was 38 years old with perfectly styled hair and a wardrobe that screamed old money. She had grown up in Connecticut in one of those families where wealth wasn't new or flashy. It was just a fact of life, like having blue eyes or brown hair. Patricia had seen her new job as more than just managing a store. In her mind, she had been elevating the brand. She had been bringing a level of sophistication and exclusivity that she felt the company needed. Patricia had genuinely believed that not every customer was right for Luminous Designs, and she had taken it upon herself to decide who was worthy of the full Luminous experience. Working under Patricia had been 26-year-old Kevin Tawes, the assistant manager, who was everything Patricia wasn't. Then there had been Ashley Chen, the 23-year-old sales associate who represented everything beautiful about Diana's vision for her company. And finally, there had been Marcus Johnson, the 45-year-old security guard who had needed this job more than anyone else in the store. On this particular morning, Diana had decided to make one of her surprise visits to the Beverly Hills store. She had climbed into her Honda Civic, the same car that always got strange looks when she parked it in front of luxury stores and had driven through the streets of Beverly Hills toward the store that represented everything she had worked for. When Diana had walked through the front door of her Beverly Hills flagship store, the first thing she had noticed wasn't the gleaming displays or the soft classical music. It had been that one of the display cases was slightly crooked, but Diana hadn't said anything about it. This had been supposed to be an unannounced visit to observe how her store operated when the CEO wasn't expected. She had straightened her navy blazer, touched her grandmother's bracelet for luck, and walked deeper into the store she had designed from the ground up. Diana had headed straight for the centerpiece of the entire store, the Aurora collection. This hadn't been just any jewelry display. This had been Diana's personal masterpiece, a $2 million collection of rare diamonds that represented the absolute pinnacle of her company's craftsmanship. The Aurora necklace had been priced at $350,000, and Diana had considered it one of the most beautiful pieces she had ever seen. As Diana had approached the Aurora display, Patricia had noticed her and walked over with what appeared to be a friendly smile. But if you had looked closely, you could have seen that Patricia's smile hadn't quite reached her eyes. She had already sized up Diana based on her appearance and made assumptions about what kind of customer she was dealing with. "Hi there," Patricia had said in a voice that was just a little too cheerful, a little too condescending. "Are you looking for something special today?" Diana, who had had no idea that she was being judged, had responded with genuine enthusiasm. "Yes, I'd like to see the Aurora collection." The moment Diana had said those words, Patricia's fake smile had faltered. The Aurora collection hadn't been something you showed to casual browsers. These had been museum-quality pieces that required serious buyers with serious money. Patricia's voice had taken on a different tone as she said, "Oh, those are our premium pieces. They start at $200,000. Diana had been able to hear the change in Patricia's voice, but she had given her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe Patricia had just been trying to be helpful by explaining the price range. "I understand," Diana had replied calmly. "I'd still like to see them." Now, Patricia had been in an uncomfortable position. She hadn't been able to just refuse to show the jewelry. That would have been too obviously discriminatory. But she also hadn't wanted to waste time with someone she had decided couldn't afford these pieces. So, she had tried a different approach. "Do you mind if I ask what the occasion is?" Patricia had asked, hoping to find a reason to steer Diana toward less expensive options. Diana had been genuinely puzzled by the question. In all her years of buying and selling jewelry, she had never been asked to justify why she wanted to look at something. "Does it matter?" she had asked. Reluctantly, Patricia had unlocked the Aurora display case, but she had hovered over it protectively, like she was guarding the crown jewels from a potential thief. She had moved slowly, clearly hoping that Diana would get bored and walk away. But Diana hadn't walked away. Instead, she had leaned in to examine the pieces with the practiced eye of someone who had been in the jewelry business for over 2 decades. She had pointed to the centerpiece necklace and said, "The cut on this diamond is exceptional. Colombian origin." Patricia had been completely caught off guard. How had this woman known about diamond origins just by looking? Customers didn't usually have that kind of knowledge. "How did you yes," Patricia had stammered. Diana had continued her examination, and what she had said next should have made Patricia realize she was dealing with someone who knew more about jewelry than most people in the business. "The clarity is flawless, but I noticed the setting could be improved. The prongs are slightly uneven." Now, Patricia had been getting defensive. No one had criticized the craftsmanship in her store, especially not some random customer who had driven up in a Honda Civic. "Our pieces are crafted by master jewelers," she had said stiffly. Diana, still trying to be diplomatic, had replied, "I'm sure they are. I'm just very particular about quality." That's when everything had changed. The front door had chimed, and in had walked Mr. and Mrs. Blackstone, a wealthy white couple in their 60s who were regular customers. Patricia's entire demeanor had transformed instantly. Her face had lit up with genuine excitement, and she had practically bounced on her toes as she greeted them. "Excuse me," Patricia had said to Diana without even looking at her. "I need to help these important customers." Patricia had rushed over to the Blackstones with the kind of enthusiasm she should have shown every customer. "Mr. and Mrs. Blackstone, how wonderful to see you. What brings you in today? Are you looking for something special for your anniversary?" Diana had been left standing alone next to the open display case, completely ignored. She had been able to hear every word of Patricia's conversation with the Blackstones, and what she had heard had made her stomach turn. "Sorry for the delay," Patricia had said to the Blackstones, glancing back at Diana. "We get all kinds wandering in here." Diana had stood there trying to process what she had just heard. In 23 years of building her business, she had experienced discrimination before, but never in her own store. Never from someone she was paying to represent her company's values. Ashley Chen, the young art student who worked as a sales associate, had noticed what was happening. She had been able to see Diana standing alone, clearly being ignored, and it had bothered her. Ashley had been raised to treat people with respect, regardless of what they looked like or where they came from. Ashley had approached Diana with a genuine smile. "Ma'am, can I help you with anything?" But before Diana had been able to answer, Patricia had shot Ashley a sharp look from across the store. "Ashley, please organize the back inventory," Patricia had called out, her voice carrying just enough authority to make it clear this hadn't been a request. Diana had seen the whole exchange and had felt bad for putting Ashley in an awkward position. "It's fine, dear. I'll wait," she had told Ashley softly. And wait, she had. For 15 long minutes, Diana had stood in that store, watching Patricia fawn over the Blackstones while completely ignoring her. Diana had watched Patricia show the Blackstones piece after piece, explaining the history and craftsmanship of each one. She had watched Patricia offer them champagne in comfortable chairs. She had watched Patricia treat them exactly the way every customer should have been treated in a luminous design store. Meanwhile, Diana had stood next to the still open Aurora display case, invisible. After 15 minutes of being ignored, Diana had decided she had given Patricia enough chances to do the right thing. She had walked back over to where Patricia was still chatting with the Blackstones and politely interrupted. "Excuse me," Diana had said, her voice still calm and professional. "I'm still interested in the Aurora piece." Patricia had turned to look at Diana with barely concealed annoyance. She had been clearly irritated that Diana hadn't taken the hint and left. "Look," Patricia had said, not even trying to hide her frustration anymore. "Those pieces require serious financial commitment. Maybe you'd be more comfortable in our cheaper fashion jewelry section." The fashion jewelry section. Patricia had been literally trying to redirect Diana to the cheapest items in the store, pieces that cost under $500 because she had decided that Diana couldn't afford anything expensive. Diana had felt her jaw tighten, but she had kept her voice steady. "I'd like to purchase the Aurora necklace. The $350,000 piece." Patricia laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a genuine laugh, as if Diana had just told her the funniest joke she had ever heard. "I'm going to need to see proof of funds first," Patricia had said, still smiling like she had caught Diana in some kind of game. "Proof of funds?" Diana had asked, genuinely confused. "Credit cards, bank statements, something that shows you can actually afford this," Patricia had explained as if she were talking to a child who didn't understand how money worked. Diana had looked around the store, her mind racing. "Is this standard policy for all customers?" Patricia had glanced over at the Blackstones, who had still been browsing comfortably without anyone asking them for financial verification. For purchases of this magnitude, yes, Patricia had lied smoothly. But Diana had been watching the Blackstones for the past 15 minutes. She had seen them handle pieces worth just as much as the Aurora necklace. She had seen Patricia offer them champagne and treat them like royalty. And she had noticed that not once had Patricia asked them for proof of funds, credit checks, or any kind of financial verification. Patricia turned to her. "Get out of here. You don't even look like someone who can afford the Aurora piece. Probably you're here to steal it, so get out." Diana had looked Patricia straight in the eye and said, "I won't get out." The statement had hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Patricia's smile had finally disappeared completely as she realized that Diana wasn't some confused customer who had wandered into the wrong store. Diana had been someone who understood exactly what was happening and wasn't going to let it slide. If you were in Diana's shoes, would you leave the store for peace to reign or stay to reveal who you are? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this on Dark Stories. The temperature in the store had seemed to drop 10 degrees as the two women stared at each other. The Blackstones had stopped browsing and turned to watch. Ashley had frozen behind the counter. Kevin had looked up from his paperwork with concern. Even Marcus, the security guard, had shifted his position to get a better view of what was unfolding. Diana had given Patricia every opportunity to treat her with basic human dignity. She had been patient, polite, and professional, even when faced with obvious discrimination. But Patricia had crossed a line that Diana couldn't ignore. "Excuse me." Patricia's face had hardened like concrete, her fake politeness finally dropping completely. The mask had been off, and what Diana had seen underneath hadn't been pretty. "You heard me," Diana had replied, her voice still controlled, but with an edge that hadn't been there before. "You've treated me differently from the moment I walked in." Patricia's eyes had flashed with indignation. How dare this woman accuse her of discrimination? "I treat everyone according to our store standards," she said, crossing her arms defensively. Diana had looked around the store at the Blackstones who had still been being treated like royalty, at the champagne glasses Patricia had offered them, at the comfortable chairs they had been invited to sit in. Then she looked back at Patricia. "Your standards seem to vary based on skin color." That accusation had hit Patricia like a slap across the face. Her voice had risen an octave as she had practically shrieked. "That is completely inappropriate. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." But Diana hadn't been backing down. Not this time. Not in her own store. "I'm not going anywhere until I speak to your manager." Patricia's face had turned red with rage. "I am the manager." Diana's voice had remained steady, but there had been steel underneath it. "Now then, I want to speak to your manager." "There's no one above me at this location," Patricia had declared, puffing herself up with self-importance. "This is my store." Something in Diana's expression had shifted. Her voice had dropped to barely above a whisper, but somehow it had carried more threat than if she had been shouting, "Your store." That's when Patricia had made the biggest mistake of her career. Instead of recognizing the danger she was in, instead of hearing the warning in Diana's voice, Patricia had doubled down on her arrogance. "Yes, my store," Patricia had screamed, her accent becoming more pronounced as her composure cracked. "I run this place and I decide who gets served and who doesn't." Diana had stood up straighter, and for the first time since walking into the store, she had looked every inch the powerful businesswoman she was. "And you've decided I don't deserve service." "I've decided you're causing a disruption and possibly a thief," Patricia had shot back, gesturing wildly with her hands. By then, the entire store had gone quiet, except for their voices. The Blackstones had stopped pretending to browse and had been openly staring at the confrontation. Other customers had pulled out their phones and had been recording everything. Ashley had stood frozen behind the counter, her hand covering her mouth in shock. Even the soft classical music hadn't been able to mask the tension that had filled the air. Kevin Torres, the assistant manager, who had been watching this disaster unfold, had finally tried to step in. His business school training had told him that this situation had been spiraling out of control and had needed to be de-escalated immediately. "Patricia, maybe we should," Kevin had started, his voice diplomatic and calm, but Patricia had whirled on him like a wild animal. "Kevin, stay out of this," she screamed, pointing her finger at him accusingly. Then she had turned to Marcus, the security guard. "Marcus, escort this woman out." "Ma'am, are you sure?" Marcus had said carefully, looking between Patricia and Diana. That's when Patricia had completely lost it. Her voice had risen to a shriek that could probably have been heard 3 stores down. "She's a thief and doesn't belong here. Get her out or you're both fired." The word fired had seemed to echo through the store. Patricia had just threatened to fire 2 employees for refusing to remove a customer who hadn't committed any crime other than asking to buy expensive jewelry while being black. Diana's composure, which had held steady through 15 minutes of microaggressions and outright discrimination, had finally cracked. Not into rage, but into something far more dangerous. Cold, calculated fury. You want to talk about firing people? Diana had asked, her voice so quiet that everyone in the store had leaned forward to hear her. Diana had pulled out her phone, but her hands had been shaking then, not with fear, but with the kind of rage that came from years of being underestimated, dismissed, and discriminated against. The rage of a woman who had built an empire from nothing, only to watch an employee destroy everything she had worked for in the span of 30 minutes. Don't you dare record this! Patricia had screamed, now completely hysterical. Diana had looked up from her phone with eyes that could have cut glass. I'm not recording, she had said in a voice that was deadly calm. I'm calling my board of directors. For the first time since this confrontation had begun, Patricia had looked genuinely confused. You're what? Diana's fingers had moved across her phone screen as she dialed a number she knew by heart. When someone had answered, her voice had been crisp and professional. The voice of someone who was used to being obeyed without question. Sarah, it's Diana Mitchell. Emergency board meeting. Now, Patricia had caught the name Diana Mitchell. And something had tugged at the back of her memory. She had heard that name before, but where? In her panic and rage, she hadn't been able to quite place it. But across the store, Ashley Chen had gone white as a sheet. She had been frantically scrolling through something on her phone, her eyes getting whiter and whiter with each second that passed. Suddenly, she had gasped so loudly that several customers had turned to look at her. Kevin Torres had been watching Diana carefully throughout this entire confrontation, and something about her bearing, her confidence, her knowledge of jewelry had been nagging at him. When he had heard the name Diana Mitchell and had seen Ashley's reaction, the pieces had finally clicked into place. The color had drained from his face as he had realized exactly who they were dealing with. Diana had continued her phone conversation, her voice carrying clearly through the now silent store. Yes, I'm at the Beverly Hills location. We have a serious problem. The way she had said Beverly Hills location, not the Beverly Hills store or a store in Beverly Hills, but the Beverly Hills location, had implied ownership, had implied authority, had implied that she had the right to call emergency board meetings about what happened in that store. Patricia had still been standing there, mouth open, trying to process what she was hearing. The name Diana Mitchell had been circling around in her brain like a word on the tip of her tongue that she couldn't quite remember. I need you to conference with the entire board, Diana had continued into her phone. Yes, all of them. This can't wait until Monday. Other customers had been recording everything on their phones by then. The Blackstones had moved closer, clearly fascinated by the drama unfolding in front of them. Ashley had been showing Kevin something on her phone, and Kevin's face had kept getting paler and paler. There's been a serious violation of company policy, Diana had said into her phone, her eyes never leaving Patricia's face. Discrimination, harassment, complete abandonment of our core values. Each word had hit Patricia like a physical blow. Company policy, core values. Who had this woman been and why had she been talking like she had authority over store policies? I'll hold while you get everyone on the line, Diana had said, then had lowered her phone and looked directly at Patricia. The store had been so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. Customers, employees, everyone had been frozen, waiting to see what would happen next. Even the classical music had seemed to have stopped, though that might have just been because everyone had been holding their breath. Diana had stood there with her phone in her hand, looking at Patricia with an expression that had been part disappointment, part rage, and part something else. Something that had looked almost like sadness. The sadness of someone who had built something beautiful, only to watch it be destroyed by the very people she had trusted to protect it. Patricia had finally found her voice, though it had come out as barely a whisper. Who? Who are you calling? Diana's smile had been sharp as a blade. I told you, my board of directors, the people who make decisions about stores like this one, the people who decide who stays and who goes. And that's when Patricia Whitman had finally realized that she had made the biggest mistake of her life. The name Diana Mitchell hadn't just been familiar. It had been the name on every company memo, every policy document, every paycheck she had received for the past 8 months. Diana Mitchell hadn't been just some customer who had wandered into the store. Diana Mitchell had been the founder, the CEO, the woman who had built Luminous Designs from nothing, and who had owned every single store in the company. The woman Patricia had discriminated against, dismissed, and tried to have removed from the store hadn't been just any customer. She had been the customer, the one customer in the world who had the power to end Patricia's career with a single phone call. And Patricia had just given her every reason to do exactly that. "Oh my God," Ashley gasped, her voice rising with each word as the reality of the situation had hit her like a freight train. Kevin Torres had looked at Ashley's phone screen and had seen the company newsletter photo that every Luminous Designs employee received monthly. There had been Diana Mitchell smiling from the front page under the headline CEO Spotlight, building dreams one store at a time. Kevin's face had gone from pale to absolutely white as he had realized they were all witnessing the destruction of Patricia's career in real time. "Patricia, stop. Just stop talking," Kevin had said urgently, trying to save his boss from digging herself deeper into a hole she'd never climb out of. But Patricia had still been completely oblivious to the disaster unfolding around her. She had looked around at her employees' shocked faces, at the customers recording everything, at the chaos she had created, and had demanded, "What are you all looking at?" That's when Diana had ended her phone call. She had slipped her phone back into her purse with the calm precision of someone who had just set the wheels of justice in motion. When she had looked up at Patricia, her expression had been serene, almost peaceful, the kind of calm that came right before a storm. "Patricia," Diana had said, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to being heard. "What do you know about Luminous Designs' founding principles?" Patricia had been annoyed by the question. Here she had been trying to handle what she had seen as a disruptive customer. And now this woman had been quizzing her about company policy. Diana had reached into her purse with deliberate slowness, like a gunslinger drawing a weapon in an old Western movie. She had pulled out a business card and held it between two fingers, letting Patricia get a good look at it. "Diana Mitchell," she had read aloud. "Founder and Chief Executive Officer." The sound that had come from Patricia's throat hadn't been quite a gasp and hadn't been quite a scream. It had been the sound of someone's entire world crashing down around them in the span of 3 seconds. The business card might as well have been a death ticket for her career. Patricia had stared at the card, her hands shaking so violently she could barely focus on the words, "This isn't. You can't be." Diana's voice had been calm, but underneath the calm had been a steel edge that could cut through diamond. "Can't be what, Patricia? Can't be successful. Can't be wealthy. Can't own the store you just claimed was yours." The full weight of what Patricia had done had finally been sinking in. She had discriminated against her own CEO. She had tried to have the founder of the company removed from her own store. She had violated every principle that Diana had built the company on, and she had done it right in front of cameras and witnesses. Patricia's composure had completely shattered. Tears had started streaming down her face as she broke down completely. "I didn't know. I never meant." But Diana hadn't been interested in Patricia's excuses. 23 years of building a business had taught her to see through fake apologies and desperate backtracking. "You meant every word," Diana had said with quiet certainty. "You meant every look, every assumption." The Blackstones, who had been watching this drama unfold like it was a movie, had quietly gathered their things and left the store. They had been embarrassed to have been part of this situation, embarrassed that they had been treated like royalty while another customer was being discriminated against right in front of them. Other customers had remained frozen in place, some still recording, all of them understanding that they were witnessing something extraordinary. This hadn't been just a customer complaint. This had been a reckoning. Diana had turned to address each of her employees individually, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned the right to judge their actions. "Kevin," she had said, looking at the young assistant manager who had tried to intervene. "You tried to stop this. You recognized that something was wrong and you attempted to prevent it from escalating." Kevin nodded, too stunned to speak. "Ashley," Diana had continued, turning to the art student who had shown kindness from the beginning. "You showed genuine care for a customer who was being ignored. You embody the values this company was built on." Ashley's eyes had filled with tears, but they had been tears of relief and gratitude. "Marcus," Diana had said to the security guard who had refused to remove her from the store, "you questioned orders that felt wrong. You used your judgment instead of blindly following instructions. Marcus had stood a little straighter, recognizing that his military instincts had served him well. Then Diana had turned to Patricia and her voice had carried the weight of profound disappointment. And you? You violated every principle this company stands for. Patricia had been sobbing by then, makeup running down her face, her perfect appearance completely destroyed. The confidence and authority she had displayed just minutes earlier had evaporated completely. Diana's voice had remained calm, but it had carried the finality of a judge delivering a sentence. Clear out your desk, Patricia. You no longer work here. Patricia had collapsed into herself like a building being demolished. Please, I have children, a mortgage. I was just trying to protect the store's reputation. Diana had looked at Patricia with something that might have been pity if it hadn't been mixed with such disappointment. Whose reputation? The store's or your own prejudices? I'll do better. I'll change. Please don't do this, Patricia had begged, reaching out toward Diana like she was drowning and Diana was her only lifeline. But Diana had heard these desperate promises before from other employees over the years who had violated company policy and then had tried to bargain their way out of consequences. You had your chance to do better, Diana had said quietly. You chose not to take it. The security cameras had captured everything. Every microaggression, every discriminatory comment, every moment of Patricia's unprofessional behavior had been recorded in high definition. There had been no disputing what had happened. No room for Patricia to claim she had been misunderstood or treated unfairly. Diana had looked around at her remaining employees, the ones who had tried to do the right thing even when it had been difficult. Kevin, she had said, as of right now, you're the manager of this location. Kevin's eyes had widened. In the span of 30 minutes, he had gone from assistant manager to full manager of the most prestigious store in the Luminous Designs chain. Ashley, Diana had continued, you're now the assistant manager. Ashley had covered her mouth with her hands, tears of joy replacing the tears of shock she had been crying moments earlier. And Marcus, Diana had said, turning to the security guard who had shown such good judgment. You're receiving a commendation for your professionalism and a raise effective immediately. In less than an hour, Patricia had lost everything, while 3 employees who had shown integrity and character had been rewarded for doing the right thing. It had been a perfect example of how actions had consequences, and how treating people with dignity and respect wasn't just morally right, it had been good business. Patricia had still been on the floor crying hysterically, trying to process that her life had just been turned upside down. The woman she had dismissed as unworthy of service had not only been wealthy enough to afford anything in the store. She had owned the entire company. The store Patricia had claimed was hers had belonged to the woman she had tried to have thrown out. Diana had looked down at Patricia one last time. There had been no satisfaction in her expression, no joy in having destroyed someone's career. There had been only the quiet certainty of someone who had done what needed to be done to protect the values she had spent her life building. The other customers in the store had still been recording, still watching, still trying to process what they had witnessed. They had come in to buy jewelry, and instead had gotten a front row seat to one of the most dramatic examples of justice they had ever seen. But Patricia hadn't been done begging. She had struggled to her feet, mascara streaking down her cheeks, her perfectly styled hair now disheveled from her breakdown. Diana, please, she had said, using Diana's first name for the first time, as if familiarity could somehow save her now. I made a mistake. One mistake? Don't let it ruin my entire life. Diana had turned back to face Patricia, and for a moment, there had been something almost like compassion in her eyes. One mistake, she had repeated softly. Patricia, this wasn't one mistake. This was a pattern of behavior that revealed who you really are. But I can change, Patricia had insisted desperately. I can take sensitivity training. I can. You can't train away prejudice, Diana had interrupted. You can only choose not to act on it. And today, you chose to act on every single bias you have. Patricia's legs had given out again, and she had sunk into one of the chairs that she had offered to the Blackstones, but never to Diana. The irony hadn't been lost on anyone in the room. Diana had addressed the store one more time, her voice carrying to every corner of the space she had designed with her own hands. To our customers who witnessed this, she had said, looking directly at the people who were still recording. I want you to know that this is not what Luminous Design stands for. This is not who we are, and this will never happen again in any of my stores. One of the customers, an elderly gentleman who had been quietly observing everything, had stepped forward. Ma'am, he had said respectfully, the way you handled this situation showed more grace and strength than I've ever seen. You should be proud of what you've built here. Diana nodded gratefully. Thank you, but I'm only as good as the people who represent my company. Today, 3 of my employees showed me exactly why I'm proud to have built this business on dark stories. Kevin had still been processing his promotion, but he had stepped forward with the professionalism that had just earned him the biggest opportunity of his career. Miss Mitchell, what would you like us to do about the rest of today's operations? Diana had looked around the store at the customers, at the displays, at the beautiful space she had created to make people feel special when they bought jewelry to celebrate life's most important moments. We stay open, she had said firmly. We serve every customer with the respect and dignity they deserve, and we make sure that what happened here today never happens anywhere else in this company. Ashley, still stunned by her promotion, had asked quietly, what about the media? People are posting videos online already. Diana had built her business in the age of social media. She had understood that videos of this confrontation would be everywhere within hours. Let them post, she had said calmly. Let the world see what happens when you judge people by their appearance instead of their character. Let them see what happens when someone tries to deny service to a customer in their own store. Marcus had approached Diana with the respect of one professional to another. Ma'am, should I escort Miss Whitman from the premises? Diana had looked at Patricia, who had been quietly gathering her things from behind the counter, her movements slow and defeated. No, Marcus, let her leave with whatever dignity she has left. Patricia had paused in her packing and looked up at Diana one last time. I really am sorry, she had said, and for the first time, her apology had sounded genuine rather than desperate. Diana had studied Patricia's face for a long moment. I believe you are, she had said finally. But sorry doesn't undo the damage you've done. Sorry doesn't erase the way you made me feel or the example you set for your colleagues or the customers who witnessed your behavior. Patricia nodded, understanding finally that there would be no reprieve, no second chance, no way to undo what she had done. She had finished packing her personal items into a small box and had walked toward the door. As she had reached the exit, Patricia had turned back one more time. For what it's worth, she had said quietly, you built something incredible here. I'm sorry I wasn't worthy of being part of it. And then Patricia Whitman had walked out of Luminous Design's Beverly Hills for the last time, carrying her box of belongings and the knowledge that she had destroyed her own career through her own prejudices and assumptions. The store had fallen quiet for a moment as everyone had processed what they had just witnessed. Then Diana had clapped her hands together once, a sharp sound that had brought everyone's attention back to the present. All right, everyone, she had said, her voice returning to its normal warmth and authority. We have a business to run. Kevin, I'll need you to call HR about Patricia's termination and your promotion. Ashley, congratulations on your new position. We'll discuss your new responsibilities tomorrow. Marcus, thank you for showing such good judgment today. As the immediate crisis had passed and normal operations had begun to resume, the remaining customers in the store had found themselves in the unique position of shopping for jewelry from a CEO who had just provided them with an unforgettable lesson in leadership, justice, and the power of staying true to your values, even in the most difficult circumstances on dark stories. Diana Mitchell had walked into her own store as a customer and had been treated like she didn't belong there. She had been walking out as the CEO who had just reminded everyone exactly what her company stood for and exactly what happened to people who forgot those values. The crooked display case had been straightened. Patricia Whitman had been unemployed, and 3 employees had learned that doing the right thing, even when it was difficult, always paid off in the end. Justice had been served, not with anger or revenge, but with the quiet strength of a woman who had spent her entire life proving that she belonged everywhere she chose to go on dark stories. With Patricia gone and the immediate crisis over, Diana had walked back to the display case that had caught her attention when she first entered the store. The case had still been slightly crooked, a small imperfection in an otherwise perfect store. Diana had placed her hands on either side of it and had gently adjusted it until it was perfectly aligned. It had been a simple gesture, but somehow it had felt symbolic. Diana putting her store back in order after the chaos Patricia had created. She had turned to address the customers who had remained in the store, many of whom had still been processing what they had witnessed. "I apologize for the disruption," Diana had said, her voice warm but professional. "This is not the luminous standard." An elderly woman who had been quietly observing everything had approached Diana with obvious admiration. "Ma'am," she had said, "what you built here is incredible, and how you handled that situation with such grace." Diana had smiled, and for the first time since entering the store, it had been a completely genuine smile. "Grace isn't always easy," she had replied. "But it's always necessary." Kevin, still adjusting to his new role as store manager, had been watching Diana throughout the entire confrontation with something approaching awe. "How did you stay so calm for so long?" he had asked. Diana had looked at Kevin with the expression of a teacher sharing an important lesson. 20 years of building this company taught me that my response defines me, not their actions," she had said. "I could have lost my temper. I could have screamed back at Patricia. I could have used my power to humiliate her. But that wouldn't have made me right. It would have just made me loud." Diana had walked closer to one of the cameras that customers had still been using to record, and she had looked directly into the lens. When she had spoken, it had been with the conviction of someone who had spent her entire life turning obstacles into opportunities. "I didn't build this company to prove I belong somewhere," she had said, her voice carrying the weight of 23 years of struggle and success. "I built it to create spaces where everyone belongs." She had paused, touching the tarnished silver bracelet on her wrist. The same bracelet she had worn through poverty, through rejection, through every challenge that had brought her to this moment. This bracelet survived poverty, discrimination, and loss, Diana had continued, holding up her wrist so the camera could see the simple piece of jewelry that meant more to her than all the diamonds in her store. "It taught me that real value isn't about what others see on the surface. It's about what you carry inside you." Diana had moved back to the Aurora collection, the $2 million display that Patricia had been so reluctant to show her. She had begun arranging each piece with careful precision, treating every necklace, every ring, every bracelet as if it were a work of art deserving of respect and attention. "Success isn't just about reaching the top," Diana had said as she worked, her hands gentle but sure as she positioned each piece of jewelry in its perfect place. "It's about who you choose to be when you get there." She had stepped back from the display case, satisfied that everything was exactly where it should be. The store had been operating normally by then, with Kevin helping customers, Ashley learning her new responsibilities, and Marcus maintaining his professional watch over everyone's safety. Diana had looked around at the store she had built, at the employees who had shown integrity under pressure, at the customers who had witnessed justice being served with dignity rather than revenge. This had been what she had worked for. Not just the financial success, but the creation of a space where people could feel valued and respected regardless of who they were or where they came from. The woman who had been told she didn't belong in her own store had reminded everyone exactly why she belonged everywhere she chose to go on Dark Stories. Through grace, through strength, and through the unshakable belief that treating people with dignity wasn't just good business, it had been the only way to build something that lasted. The crooked display case had been straight. The discriminatory manager had been gone. And Diana Mitchell had once again proven that the most powerful response to prejudice wasn't anger. It had been success lived with grace and used to lift others up on Dark Stories. If you enjoyed this story, click on the subscribe button and share with others so they can learn too. See you in our next on Dark Stories.